Welcome to Foreign Policy Focus, episode 67. I am the show's host, Kyle. Today's show, I got a whole bunch of news stories to catch up on. For those of you who listened to episode 67, you know that I was a little behind on the news for the weekend, and so now I got news from the weekend and news from the first couple days for this week to cover. Keep everybody updated and informed on all the happenings on foreign policy. Of course, this is the most important issue. This is where the government spends the most money, kills the most people, does the most moral damage, and the most damage to our culture, both abroad and at home. It's really hard to overstate the downside to war, especially in the American empire right now, when you have so much glorification. Even anchors on the supposed left-wing out-of-party channels still call military strikes beautiful and a sign of strength. It's never, gross and disgusting, and at best this really ugly thing that we have to do to kill people, but we only have to do it because it's the absolute last resort and it's the absolute most dangerous thing. And so just staying up to date on everything and keeping up with the news is going to help everybody to, just know what's going on and be able to, one, speak on it, because so many people really don't know what they're talking about in foreign policy. If you could get into the details with them, typically, I find that they may even start to open their eyes to our side of things just because they realize they know, kind of so little on the issue. I mean, what you get from watching an hour on Fox News with Hannity talking to Charles Krauthammer is absolutely nothing relevant. There's no nuance, there's arguments, there's no detail, there's absolutely nothing that is actually realistic to the situation on the ground. It's just a world and a reality and a narrative that they've invented for themselves that they then communicate to other people. We're well past the time when people on major news shows really talk about and seriously ask questions about the state of the world abroad. Of course, there's a pretty popular viral video going around right now of Tucker Carlson humiliating neocon Matt Boot, I believe, and really actually doing some decent work, asking some real questions. And when it's so hard to stay informed, listening to shows like mine, Scott Horton's show, Around the Empire, are so important, and reading all the important news stories and keeping up to date is just really important. So if everybody share the show, that would be great. Now just getting into the news. First story I found interesting was that 70% of Americans polled said they are afraid of a major war. It seemed to be that the numbers were pretty even, that both a good portion of Democrats and Republicans both believed America was close to a major war. The just difference was by who. Republicans favoring states like, I believe, North Korea, Iran, and China, with Democrats favoring Russia. Of course, I think it shows just how, as I was talking about in the show's opening, with the alternate realities that the anchors and the commentators on these news shows create for themselves, it then draws other people into those realities as well. And so you could have one political party being absolutely 100%, convinced that Russia would be a good ally and that we should work with Russia and Syria, and the other country believing that working with Russia is a sign that our president is a Manchurian candidate and a puppet of Putin. It's just unbelievable that both of these things could possibly be thought at the same time. And so obviously there's a real disconnect between the reality and what most people believe. And I think the one thing that you could take from this, though, is that Americans do have a feeling that our foreign policy is going to lead to a war. And I don't think Americans are necessarily wrong to be afraid with the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration against states like Iran and North Korea and Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And with the Democrats' absolute insane Red Scare McCarthyism tactics going against Russia and just, outstanding issues with China and the South China Sea, it's not unrealistic that a major war could break out with, both American and Russian planes flying over Syria and both countries having threatened each other in that region. It's not that unbelievable that one day an American plane or a Russian plane somehow creates a problem with the other side, and suddenly we're looking down the barrel of World War III, when yesterday it looked like everything was generally good. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I think that one of the reasons so many Americans are nervous is because it's just constantly on the news every day. There's war death destruction and all around the world, and everybody either wants America in or wants America more in than they already are. A story that I see as a nothing story, but man, has gotten a lot of attention in the press is this apparent second meeting between Trump and Putin. Now, this could have been a big deal. Maybe Trump and what apparently happened, we'll start there, is that there was a world leaders G20 dinner. I'm not sure who attends this meeting. It doesn't sound like press did because nobody had any idea how long Trump and Putin talked at this meeting. It occurred later in the day after the agreement or the talks earlier, the scheduled talks in Warsaw. It seems that this meeting could have been from, exchanging pleasantries, like saying hello. I'm sure Trump said hi to every other world leader at the dinner. I don't think you go to these dinners and necessarily snub people. Or maybe Trump and Putin sat down and talked about, highly classified things, although that just seems unlikely given the setting in the arena and that there's so many other world leaders there and all these other issues. But the media is going absolutely crazy about this, saying, how could Trump meet Putin again? This is unprecedented and terrible, and we can't believe Trump must have passed secret information to Putin at this, and all this other ridiculous stuff. Like, come on, people. They were at the same, restaurant eating dinner at the same event, and they happened to talk to each other at some point that night. That's not that big of a deal. Potentially, I guess, we never know what's said, so something could be a big deal. But geez, you're spending hours of your time covering these stories and running them on the front of your web pages and getting attracting everybody's attention to it. When there's tens of millions of people in the Horn of Africa and in Yemen starving to death right now, and it's just amazing that all the focus could be on this meeting that the people really don't know anything about, and it probably isn't a big deal anyways. And if any grown adult thinks about it rationally, they're probably going to come to the thought that, oh, this is probably just them both being at the same dinner, saying hi to each other, and moving on. We have a few appointments coming out by Trump. The first is that Trump will nominate John Huntsman Jr., former governor of Utah, to be ambassador to Russia. I'm not going to claim to know a whole lot about John Huntsman Jr. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look into him yet. But if my memory serves me correct, he's pretty much from that kind of mainstream establishment Utah Republican Party, Jason Chaffetz type. He's been ambassador a couple times before, so I guess he has some experience with this. I'm guessing he'll make it through the nomination process in the Senate. At this point, it seems that Rand Paul could, partner with a couple other senators to get with a couple other Republican senators to get some stuff blocked, but I don't know if Rand Paul or any Republicans will be willing to make a stand on this anyways. Trump is also going to appoint, I don't think this appointment requires a congressional approval, but maybe I'm wrong. It's an appointment this time and nomination the other, and that is Joseph Kernan to be the Undersecretary of Defense for the Intelligence Office. I don't know a whole lot about Kernan either, except that he's a former Navy SEAL. Rex Tillerson is closing the Office of Global Criminal Justice at the Pentagon, or at the State Department. Apparently, this move is part of a restructuring plan to try to cut the budget of the Pentagon. One of the things that, I think some people are making a big deal out of this because it was an office that prosecuted international war criminals. I'm not sure that I approve of the actions of this office all the time. I don't think they were probably the best. Like I said, again, like the John Hudson thing, I need to look into the office a little bit and see what's going on. But just from some of the stories that I've read online, most people are just up in arms about Trump closing this office and never citing any real, what's going on here. Maybe they could just be shifting people around, or maybe the office didn't have any results anyways. One of the big stories of the day is that Trump certified the Iran nuclear deal, saying that yes, Iran is following the nuclear deal. They only did this because there was no evidence whatsoever that Iran is in any way violating the nuclear arms agreement. It's a P5+1 agreement with, the UK, Germany, France, China, Russia, the US, Iran, and then the European Union all being signatories to the agreement. The Iran nuclear deal, of course, was orchestrated in the Obama administration, I believe mostly under Secretary of State John Kerry. The deal was an agreement for heightened IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Association, I believe, body that goes around and checks that all countries are applying with the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then It then enforces the extra rules put on Iran. This includes their ability to pretty much look into Iran anywhere they want at any time to address any accusations that Iran is possibly testing nuclear weapons. They've done this. They've gone to, I believe, most of the big military bases in Iran, even the ones Iran really didn't want to open their doors to the IAEA to. There's cameras at most of the nuclear sites all the time. There's IAEA personnel in Iran. I mean, they're really there. There's nothing going on, and they've said time and time again that absolutely is nothing going on in Iran. Of course, all the Republicans are up in arms about this for God knows why. It makes absolutely no sense to me that America's foreign policy, and especially the policy of the Republicans, is to favor Saudi Arabia and the Iran-Saudi Arabia proxy war, unless it's just all about the Israel situation. Iran provides weapons to Hezbollah, which repels Israel, and that upsets the Israelis and the Israel lobby in the United States. Either way, the Iran nuclear deal was an agreement that Iran would follow all these conditions in exchange for the West and all other countries lifting sanctions against Iran. Iran's met the deal, and so America's lifted sanctions. As far as it goes, Iran has done more to comply with the deal than the United States have, while Iran has conducted ballistic missile tests that have upset the United States. Those ballistic missile tests are in no way part of the deal. The United States, on their end, has certainly imposed a lot of sanctions, I guess, against Iran that kind of skirt the nuclear arms deal and allow the United States to continue to economically attack Iran while at the same time, following their half of the nuclear arms deal. Pretty immediately after this deal, the White House then announced new sanctions on 18 individuals or organizations within Iran, pretty much showing that, yeah, you're following the deal, but, we're out to get you anyways. Certainly, this is a problem for the president, who is one of the more moderate politicians in Iran, Rouhani, who was just reelected, who's trying to open the door to the West and come in from the cold. And the reaction of the White House isn't to, try to say, show good faith to the Iranian people, who, just like the Americans, are influenced by a very warlike, right-wing and fundamentalist group in that party. Just like the neocons over here, they hate America and try to rally their citizens to hate America. And my point being, the neocons rallying Americans to hate Iranians. And so to make, the deal look better to the Iranian people, certainly America should do their very least and abide by the spirit of the deal. One of the things Trump talks about is putting American first and helping American business and people, but by blocking U.S. trade from being able to happen with Iran, it certainly makes Americans poor. The more that Iran or the Americans could buy and sell to Iran, especially in the aerospace industry, the more jobs that could be created in the U.S., maybe the cheaper the U.S. could get some energy. Iran, shares a large natural gas field with Qatar. They produce a lot of oil, and so there's plenty of energy for Iran to export to the United States and the West. And as we all know, if you increase the supply and demand remains the same, then the price will go down to reflect the new amount of product on the market. So it's just a real shame what Donald Trump is doing on the nuclear weapons deal. It's certainly not in line with his American first principle, which he simply seems to have completely given up on. However, this was an inconsistency within the campaign. So I guess on the foreign policy front, one of the few places where he's actually consistent is on Iran, and he hated Iran before, he hates Iran now. The vice chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says that North Korea cannot hit the United States with any accuracy. I covered this on a couple of shows ago, saying that South Korea had revealed that the North Koreans do not have the re-entry cap needed for their ballistic missile tests to be able to withstand the re-entry and then hit a target accurately. It seems to me that the kind of simple way to put this is that North Korea may have invented a missile that could go very far and they could kind of shoot it in a general direction, but that doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere near where they want to. It's not going to be, a Wile E. Coyote thing where the missile takes off, goes halfway, and then turns around and comes back to North Korea. But it seems like there's a pretty good chance it could drop out of the air, or it could just not, land short, land long, east, west, up, down, left, right, whatever, direction. It's just not going to go where they plan it to. This is important for the American people to understand, though. I think a lot of times whenever we look at the news on North Korea, it's typically portrayed as North Korea has the ability to attack the United States. North Korea is an existential threat to the United States, and eventually the United States is going to have to do something to save itself from this existential threat. It's not the case. We have the Vice Chair, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, absolutely admitting it. Another cause for the propagandists in America to go crazy and fearmonger all over the place is China is deploying troops to their first overseas base. This base is in Djibouti, and I don't think it's all that far from the United States base there. So for Djibouti, either they're doing very well, getting a lot of money from both the United States and China and kind of double dipping and selling to both of them in the market, or it could be a really bad choice in that there may be a lot of bombs going off in that area at some point in the future, or it could, just turn, the U.S. government can then orchestrate and overthrow the Djibouti government. The amazing thing is how upset Americans are about this. So like, oh my God, this is Chinese aggression. They're spreading overseas. Let they put their base right next to ours. But we have to remember that the Taiwanese government is pretty much an American proxy, and they get tons of weapons from the United States, and the United States helps them to be able to have the military capabilities to defend themselves against China. And then you have the United States troops deployed in 177 bases around the world. Of course, off the Chinese coast in Okinawa, there's a huge Marine base that I believe holds one of the aircraft carriers, the U.S. aircraft carriers. There's a couple of U.S. aircraft carriers stationed around North Korea there now. And then, of course, you have 200,000 American troops stationed across the world at 177 bases. And so when you look at China's one base to America's armada of floating, military bases and aircraft carriers and all of our little bases around the world, including a new one being built in Kurdistan, troops in 177 countries and 200,000 troops in those 177 countries. It doesn't seem like what China has really compares to what the United States, which is good. And this is something that sometimes people look at me and go, you're just anti-American. How could you believe that? I'm saying that the United States has the strongest military in the world by far, and you're degrading the U.S. military, and you're the one that's saying, you hate America. Let's be real, people. America spends like 4 times what any other country does on military. It spends what the next 10 countries do in the world combined. If we're not having the biggest and most, expansive military in the history of the world, then we're really doing something wrong. So, look at this with some reality, please. Interesting news coming out of Ukraine, and that is the rebels have made a proposal to create a new state. What it sounds like this proposal is it would be like a renaming of Ukraine, a relocation of the capital city of Ukraine, and the Russian-held side being where the new capital city is, and then the city of Kiev only remaining like a capital city in ceremony only. This is apparently they're pushing a referendum that wouldn't be a proposal enforced by military force, but one voted on by the people. I don't know all the details to this. I don't think anybody does this pretty early on the announcement process. I don't know if this will turn to a vote, but certainly we should keep our hands on it. Iran and the Twitter hacking. This is a curious story. Iran has accused Saudi Arabia of hacking Iran's state media Twitter account. Iran says that hack led to the posting of a tweet that said the leader of Qatar had asked Iran to build a new Iranian military base in Qatar. Iran, I guess, is saying that this is now not true. I'm not sure what happened here. Maybe somebody at the state media accidentally posted something they weren't supposed to. And this is Iran's way of mitigating the possible truthfulness of the tweet, or Saudi Arabia actually hacked Iran. Really, who absolutely knows in that part of the world? In Saudi Arabia, we have a young woman being arrested for wearing a miniskirt and then posting a video of it on social media. Of course, this all happens while the leadership of Saudi Arabia receives billions of dollars in weapons from the United States that allows them to be able to oppress their people while they fly around on yachts, having sex with prostitutes and doing coke all day. I did read a very interesting article about the change in the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia that I may be talking about a little bit more on Friday's show. If anybody's interested in the internal politics of Saudi Arabia and would like me to cover that, let me know. It's a little bit more technical than I typically like to be on the show, and it may be a little tedious and boring to some. But if people in the audience are interested in that, I can certainly put together a show and talk about that on Friday. Saudi Arabia and the UAE issued some changes to the demands they're making of Qatar. This, of course, is after Rex Tillerson said that the demands Saudi Arabia and the UAE are making of Qatar are unreachable. The change in the demands is not much, though. It sounds like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are expecting that Qatar rebrand Al Jazeera and really hand over controls of the news network to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. I doubt Qatar is going to make this deal. In Turkey, we have another 7,400 civil servants fired. I don't know what this brings the total to, but certainly lots and lots of people in Turkey imprisoned and fired from their jobs, and Erdogan is really going for a whole cultural takeover of that country. Erdogan's another person that I'm thinking about maybe getting into a little bit more detail about, once again, more detail than I typically like to get into on the show, but I think he's had a real role in shaping Mideast foreign policy, especially over the past year since the coup. It's been a year and 4 days now. It was July 15th, 2016. At night when some troops try to take over the capital city and overthrow Erdogan, who of course was able to defeat that coup by going on FaceTime. We have 2 German citizens killed in Egypt by a suspected Islamist college student who apparently knew the civilians. It seems that foreign travel is getting more dangerous for Westerners as time goes on here. I saw some satellite photos of Mosul that were posted on the Huffington Post, just showing the destruction of the city of Mosul. I mean, you have entire neighborhoods absolutely flattened. I don't know how imaginable this is, but if you picture going outside and then every house you could see being absolutely destroyed and flattened to the ground, and just how many civilians would have died in that situation. Even if you look at the maybe the worst neighborhoods in America with the most gang members, and the U.S. government decides we're going to kill all the gang members by flattening all these buildings, and you just think of how many innocent people just trying to get by every day are going to end up dying in that situation. And that looks a lot like what happened, especially to the western part of Mosul. A Pentagon spokesperson says the YPG has taken heavy casualties in Raqqa, but didn't give any further details on what that meant. U.S. workers are building a third military base in Kurdistan. I'm not sure yet if this will be a U.S. military base or a Kurdish military base, maybe just built by the United States. The Kurds say that al-Baghdadi is hiding out in Raqqa. I'm not sure if this is true or not. The Kurds may be just looking to get more support from the United States in the fight in Raqqa to allow them to distribute some more troops up to the Afrin province, where it looks like the Turkish army is backing some Syrian rebel groups against Kurdish fighters there. It seems Turkey is providing artillery support. I don't know who started the fighting, but it seemed that Turkey was really building up around the Kurds in Afrin and looking to escalate the situation there. I'm not sure if the YPG forces in that area attacked preemptively in hopes to, prevent them from being surrounded and killed, but it looks bad for the U.S.-NATO alliance and alliance with the Kurds. Back to Baghdadi, we have General Votel, a pretty high-ranking U.S. general, saying that it doesn't matter if Baghdadi is killed or not, acknowledging that the U.S. has killed several leaders of these jihadist groups in the past, and typically to no help. Russia says that Syrian rebel groups now are no longer demanding an immediate regime change of Assad in Syria, and this is encouraging news to them. A couple quick stories on Yemen to round up the podcast. We have 2 NDAA amendments related to Yemen, and I think I may have covered both of these on the last show, but just in case I did, I want to hit them both today. The first is an amendment that will require the Pentagon to report to Congress about what's going on as far as U.S. resources in Yemen goes. And then the second amendment would actually require the United States to end support for Saudi Arabia in the war against Yemen. The other news I have is that Saudi-backed forces allied to the Yemeni government attacked Houthi rebels on the road between the port of Hadida and the city of Taiz. I believe the Houthis are still trying to take the city of Taiz from the government, and they still hold Hodeidah, the all-important port. I'm not sure what direction the rebels are looking to go. Maybe they're looking to take this portion of the road to stop Houthi support to their troops in Taiz, or maybe they're going after the port of Hodeidah, which I've warned about before could be absolute catastrophe for Yemen. So I guess, as always, let's hope for the best. Let's hope to end some wars, and I will be back on the show on Friday. For those of you who are liking the show, please share the show, rate, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. I got a whole bunch of new ratings on iTunes I'm super excited about. It actually says I got a 5-star rating now. So like I said, everybody, the podcast is growing. We're getting out there. We're looking good. You can follow me on Twitter at KYAAALE. My website is kylesfilesblog.com. My Facebook page is Kyle's Files. I write at the libertarianinstitute.org. And the Private 48 Facebook group is Foreign Policy Focus.